This week we are looking at chapter 27, which talks about the Cold War and the remaking of Europe, 1945, kind of through the 1960s. So there's four major learning objectives in this chapter, and I just want to go over those really quickly and explain them in a little bit more detail. So you're going to analyze the causes of the Cold War and evaluate its impact on politics, society, and culture. Describe the course of European economic and social recovery and contrast the different forms this took in the East and West. So Eastern Europe and Western Europe, also extending into parts of Asia. Understand the causes and consequences of decolonization in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. And finally, you should be able to evaluate the changes in post-war popular culture. So in order to understand kind of what is happening in Europe, I want to look at some of the maps that are throughout chapter 27. So this map shows you territories lost and gained after World War II. So you can also see like the big winners came out, and you can notice here in the corner it says zones of occupation. So you're going to notice parts of, especially like Germany, that's our primary one. Germany is going to be carved up and it's going to be put into like four different zones. You've got the US occupied zone, British zone, French zone, and then the Soviet Union zone. And even its capital, Berlin, you're going to see East and West Berlin. So here's kind of like showing you like what the winners were able to take in this. And then also doesn't really show you what was lost by the Axis powers, but it does show you more of what the Allies are going to gain. And here's the little key to let you know what land was gained by these different allies, like lost by Germany to Poland, territory gained by the Soviet Union, and so on. Here is another map just kind of showing you there's going to be some stuff happening in this area. We're going to come back to it. I don't know how much detail chapter 27 gets into what's happening in Kosovo and Croatia. This is a map that I really want you to look at, though, and this is Germany and then the capital city itself, Berlin, what it looks like. So you'll notice you've got French, British, and the US occupied on Western Germany, and then Eastern Germany is controlled by the Soviet Union. Same for Germany itself. You've got West Germany and East Germany, and it's going to be known as West and East Germany, like two separate entities, for several decades as we go through the Cold War. Now, the Cold War really is split between fighting for what we call democracy, and then the Soviet Union spreading communism. And we are deathly afraid of communism. We want to stop the spread of communism at any cost. But you'll notice areas like this, areas like China, most of the Cold War, there will be hot wars fought, but it's really fought over communism and trying to spread communism. So even when we start talking about post-World War II recovery and aid packages that are sent, what the U.S. does is we come up with the Marshall Plan, and we're going to send like billions of dollars to help rebuild these war-torn countries, right? Think of places like, here's a great picture for you. You can see all the rubble in the background here. This is what needs to be rebuilt, and you can see these women carrying steel to like help rebuild, but we're going to offer aid and money to these countries in order to help them rebuild after World War II, because we came out a winner, right? Our economy is going to boom after this. We're going to be lending money. So what happens is we're going to offer money even to the Soviet Union, but we have a couple of stipulations that I don't know if these are explained very well, but basically it's like, yeah, you have to tell us, we have to see all of your economics. Like, we want to know what is happening in your country, in the economy, as we give you this money. And also, we want you to vote our way. Now, we want you to have a democratic vote, and allegedly we will support whatever type of government you choose to install, as long as it's not communist. So that's one of the reasons why the Soviet Union doesn't join, and they come up with their own aid package, and they come up with their own, like their Warsaw Pact, and all these countries are going to kind of stick together, and they're going to be heavily, heavily influenced by communism. You'll notice some of the tension between the United States and the Soviet Union comes in elections in some of these countries. And we feel like the elections were not done democratically. We feel like communism was really pushed and enforced in these through use of terror. And so we kind of Winston Churchill comes up with this saying, and he says, the Iron Curtain has fallen. And what he means by the Iron Curtain is communism has fallen and it's going to overtake all of these countries. We are also going to fight, like I said, in a couple of hot wars. We don't officially engage in Korea, although it's called the Korean War. We call it the Korean conflict because we never officially declare war in Korea. We do send lots and lots of our troops to Korea to fight in that, but it's actually the United Nations that is fighting in that war. So you'll notice we still today, there's South Korea, there's North Korea, but there is a struggle over it. And really at the end of this conflict, nothing changes. North Korea is still like communist backed by Chinese communism. They actually send in forces. And South Korea is still what the U.S. likes to call democratic. So it doesn't really, we fight in this conflict and nothing really changes. It just goes back to the status quo afterwards. One area that does change is Vietnam. You'll notice North Vietnam is controlled and is supported by the Soviet Union and communism. South Vietnam is supported and has backing from the United States. These are the other countries that are involved in this war. I don't know if you know this, but there's not a North Vietnam and a South Vietnam anymore. We actually end up losing in Vietnam, and Vietnam will fall to communism. So this is a loss for the United States, and there's going to be a lot of protesting with Vietnam, and this has a lot to do with like our post World War II and like pop culture. Like the hippies, you're going to hear a lot about that culture and the anti-war movement, and that's what this is referring to, is the Vietnam War and the Korean conflict. So there's a lot of information that you're going to get out of this chapter, a lot of back and forth between communism and democracy. That's really what the Cold War boils down to. And our ally, they're no longer our ally. They quickly become the enemy right after the end of World War II. And you're going to read a little bit about why that happens between the United States and the Soviet Union.